Welcome back to Guided Growth, where we continue to unravel the stories of inspiring educators. In episode 2, we're joined by Atoanya Dubrail, whose journey from an English major to a passionate teacher is both unique and enlightening. Discover how Atoanya's aspirations to be a writer led her to a fulfilling career in shaping young minds. Dive into her experiences with diverse cultures in the classroom and her approach to teaching high school students. Join us for this insightful episode where education and personal growth intersect.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Guided Growth Podcast. We're excited for you to join us today. And today I have Atoanya Dubrail.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
I got it?
Uh-huh.
I know to me it sounds like a very fancy name. But thank you for joining us for episode 2.
Thanks for having me.
It's a new venture. It's a new project. And we're super excited to share. I know a lot of people are excited to hear the stories of teachers. And I even have teachers that are like, I want to hear what kind of topics are brought up because other teachers want to learn from teachers, parents want to learn from teachers. And one of the goals for this podcast is to share tips, stories with parents. A lot of the times parents are not in the classroom. So sometimes they don't really know what happens in the classroom. They might know a teacher from like a parent-teacher conference, which happens not every day.
No.
So this opens the door for parents to get to know teachers. And you might not be the teacher of their student or their child, but you are a teacher and you share a lot of similarities with other teachers. So that's one of our goals here at our podcast. And thank you for joining us. And I think let's get to the point. Let's get to talking. And obvious question: what led you to teaching?
The interesting thing is I didn't plan to be a teacher. I had actually gone to school as an English major with the desire to be a writer. And during my junior year of college, my department head sat me down and she said, well, you know that being a writer is not a real job. And I was like, really? I did not know that. And so I started praying, saying, God, what is it that you want me to do? And it was my mom who suggested I be a teacher. And at first I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. But I asked God over the summer to give me some jobs that would show me what it was he wanted me to do. And for the next 2 or 3 summers after that, I ended up having teaching type jobs. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to be a teacher. Yeah.
Nice. So from English major, because you wanted to be a writer, to a teacher.
Yeah.
What does that roadmap look like?
For me, I did my undergraduate in English with a minor in Spanish, and then I just went from there and went to get my master's in secondary English education. So teaching English literature basically at the middle school and high school level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you start? Did you start in the middle school or the high school level?
I started with middle school, and that really wasn't for me. And actually, I ended up leaving teaching after about 3 years, and stayed away, kind of ran away like Jonah for about 14 or 15 years.
Oh, wow.
But every job that I tended to have after that always had some type of connection with education. And the last job, before I had my youngest child, I ended up being an instructional assistant at a bilingual education, elementary school actually. And when I took the time after having the baby, I said, okay, God, I think you really want me to be a teacher. So next time I get a job, I will go back into the classroom as a teacher at the high school level, not with middle school kids. And so that's what I've been doing.
Wow. So that's quite a journey. Quite a journey. And I love that you said you were kind of like Jonah. You didn't want to be in that space, but God kept bringing you
back
into the space. So it sounds like you enjoy high school.
I do. High school kids are really at a really pivotal point in their lives where they're still kids. They're still, doing silliness and trying to get away with things. But they're also at this point where that time in their lives is about to really kind of come to an end, and they're having to begin to make some adult decisions about relationships, about what kind of job or career they're going to have, and are they going to have a relationship with God for themselves? And it makes for some really great conversations with young people where you can really have an impact, but you can also still have a lot of fun as well. And so I really enjoy working with this age group.
Interesting. What do you teach?
I teach English as a second language at Auburn Adventist Academy. So I work primarily with international and immigrant students, but I also teach world geography to general population of students. So I kind of feel like I'm always traveling because I'm always working with students who speak different languages, as well as teaching students about other countries and cultures as well.
So it helps that you teach the geography and the location of places and cultures, and then you actually immerse yourself with students that are coming from other countries and cultures.
Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just connected with you on a whole other level because I remember my ESL teacher. English was not my first language, so I had to learn English in school, and it was quite impactful. Till this day, I remember Miss Perez, who was my ESL teacher, and I'm sure the connection as a teacher is very different because you're not just teaching the subject, you're kind of helping them immerse themselves in this new country and culture. How do you see that in the classroom?
Well, the interesting thing is here at the academy is the students get immersed in the culture quite a bit, and they actually don't leave too much for me to do. That because a lot of them are dorm students because the academy is a hybrid school of both students who's boarding school and a day high school. But the students have so many opportunities to interact with students of all different ethnicities and nationalities and language groups. So they really get immersed into that culture without too much assistance from me. Yeah. That, and I would also say is social media has made the world very accessible in ways that probably even in your lifetime.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
Definitely at mine, you really had to like go and be in places, but now kids learn so much more quickly. So in that respect, I don't have to teach as much, but it is interesting, especially when you think about idioms and slang.
Oh, yeah.
I do have opportunities to teach them things like that. Yeah.
So I know we were talking off camera, you're trilingual, right? Spanish, English, French.
Yeah.
And I want to make a parentheses real quick. For those of you listening in, and if this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, I want you to know that this is a very unique podcast because it's a bilingual podcast. Every episode is recorded in Spanish and English. So our guests are bilingual.
Yeah.
And we get to host in Spanish and English because we want to make sure we can reach more people and more people can get the tips. Especially here, since we're located in Seattle, which is a very diverse city, one of the most diverse cities here in the country. So yes, you're trilingual, you speak Spanish, English, French, and all of a sudden a Ukrainian student walks in. What do you do?
Google Translate. Yeah, me and Google Translate are wonderful friends. Yeah. And probably the four main language groups that I have in my classroom this year are Ukrainian, Spanish speakers, Chinese, and Korean. Oh. And I wish I spoke all languages so that I could speak to all of them. But initially, Google Translate, but then I also have the students help each other a lot, use lots of illustrations.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's how I get by.
So, okay, give me an example, because let's say I speak Spanish and you speak Ukrainian.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that interaction for us? Because I can't imagine it. What do you see when you put two people that don't speak the same language to do an activity?
It's so funny, but in my classes is that I have these students and they figure it out. They figure out ways. Once I saw two of them, they had their phones and they're just typing and showing each other their phones, and they're showing each other their phones so that they can communicate with each other. But eventually, it's amazing because they're immersed in this culture. Usually, within a few months, they have enough English to be able to communicate and share with people beyond their own language group, and I think that's beautiful.
Wow, that is beautiful, and I'm sure it's quite a scene to see them do that. And it gets there. On the previous episode, we talked about problem solving. A previous teacher we talked to, she has a background in engineering, and she said, I love bringing that problem solving background into the classroom and allowing them. And that's literally what you're doing. That problem solving, you put them in this situation. So it must be quite a sight to see that. As a teacher, what is your main goal? I mean, I know teaching is your main goal.
Yeah.
But what are some other goals that you have in your heart as a teacher?
I would say probably the two things that I am hoping that students will walk away with is, first and foremost, I really hope that each day that they encounter Christ when they come into my classroom. I'm not someone who overly or directly there's like a whole lot of Bible study over every lesson. But my prayer every day is that in their interactions with me, that students will experience what it is to be loved, what it is to be accepted, what it is to have someone be patient with you, to persevere, to cheer you on, to give you mercy and grace when you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Is that I'm really hoping that they will meet Christ. And I think the second thing is that I really want to develop lifelong learners, that as a teacher, I have a limited amount of time with my students every day and a limited amount of time as far as the school year is concerned. And I know that it is impossible for me to teach them everything that they need to know, or even that I want to teach them. So my biggest goal is giving them tools for how to continue learning on their own. And I usually start the school year out with that, letting them know, like, I can't teach you everything. Here are resources. I give them a list of resources and places that they can go so that they can continue their learning for themselves.
Wow, that is powerful. I love that, and it's I think it means a lot to know that a teacher thinks that way for their students. It's one of those, like, I want the future teachers of my son to be that way, and I'm sure a lot of parents are thinking that. So it's beautiful to know what's going on in the mind and the heart of a teacher. I want to backtrack a little bit because I missed this question. Why high school? And because I know you said you took a break because middle school was not for you, and high school, and you're dealing with teenagers who are still kind of like they're children, adults. Why high school?
With high school, you can actually have real conversations.
Okay, yeah.
Not that you can't have them with middle schoolers or elementary, but I think with high schoolers, they're at a point in their lives where they can really reason through some things. They're able to think a little more abstractly. Everything is not so literal for them. They're beginning to come into a place of, who am I and what does that mean? And they're a little more settled. Middle schoolers are definitely still just kind of all over the place, and elementary kids have way too much energy. But at high school, they're beginning to kind of settle down into themselves a little bit, and it makes for some really good conversations.
Okay, nice. It's interesting to hear that. I oftentimes I do know teachers tend to have their favorite parts to teach. I know our previous episode, Gladys mentioned she's like I've enjoyed all phases. Some people enjoy all the phases, but she's a substitute teacher. But some people are like, no, I like the seniors or I like the middle schoolers. So interesting. It's and off camera, you were telling me a little bit about you have a teenager.
Yes.
And so I think that also has a little to do with maybe why you enjoyed teaching high schoolers, and now you have a teenager going into high school.
Yes.
How does that roll? How do you feel like that a mom with a teenager in high school and being a teacher in high school? What does that feel like?
I try not to embarrass him as much as possible. Because I know that he wants to be his own person. So I really just kind of try to stay on the perimeter. As a mom, though, I'm always kind of looking for him and looking out for him and see what's going on. But I really try to allow him to have his own space and his own experience. I don't want him to be known as Mrs. Dubrail's son. I want him to have his own identity and his own experience.
Interesting. It's does your role as a mother come into the classroom at any given point?
All the time, all the time. I tell my kids that I'm not a teacher that happens to be a mom. I'm a mom that happens to be a teacher. And so I tend to look at all of my students as my kids. I'm jealous for them. I want to protect them. I want to push them. I want them to grow. And especially when it comes to having to discipline them, I kind of have to put on my mommy role and be like, okay, be quiet. But and probably overall thinking of it more as a mom is maybe I'm a little too nice sometimes, but they're all my babies and I want the best for them.
Nice. I guess you sit in both roles, the parent and the teacher role. How do you see, what is something you would want to share with parents that don't get to sit on that chair? The parent, how's that interaction between the teacher and the parent? What is something that you as a teacher would probably want more from parents?
Something that I would want more from, I think parents overall is that in education and just in education in general, is there tends to be this idea of like the school or the teachers know everything and what's best, and that we need to figure out ways to involve parents and have parents help us in the classroom. But I really see it the other way around, is that God has given parents the responsibility to educate their children spiritually, socially, as well as academics and preparation for life. And my role as a teacher is really helping parents fulfill that role and that responsibility. Obviously, as parents, we don't know everything. Yeah. So, at some point, we kind of have to hand off. And I feel like that's my role, is that I'm the handoff. Obviously, maybe a parent doesn't know English or world geography, and that's where I fit in. But parents are always their students' first teacher and best teacher, being an example, being wise, being involved, talking with your young person about what they're doing in school. Those are all important teaching roles as parents, and they should remember that okay. I'm not the end all be all. Yeah. They are.
So it's more like what I understand is you're saying it's more like you complement what the parent does at home.
Exactly.
It's not the opposite.
Exactly. And I think about that as I'm working with my students is, if I have a student who's not doing well, I'm thinking, if this was my kid, what would I want the teacher to do for my child to help them do better? If my child is super smart, what would I want this teacher to do for my child? And especially in a Christian school setting, these are my values as a Christian parent. I'm hoping that my student will have a teacher who exemplifies those Christian qualities, who's going to encourage and support what I'm teaching my children at home. And so as a teacher, I think about that every day as, this is what I would want for my kids. I want to be that for other people's children.
Nice. That's I'm loving everything you're saying today. It's just I'm reflecting on it, and it's it might be the new parent in me. I was telling you I have a baby, and it's one of those things like, wow, like teachers think about this. We all go through the school phase. We've all been students, but then, like I said, maybe it's the new parent in me. Now I'm stepping into the parent role of like, my child is going to have teachers one day. Yeah. And it's beautiful to know that teachers think this way. And so it's awesome. As we're wrapping up, time is flying by. As we're wrapping up, do you have any stories that you would like to share? Something that maybe has happened in the classroom that you've taken with you that lives with you, like a story or something you've seen or something you do in the classroom that you've seen like it's a huge impact in students?
Yeah, it's interesting is that, especially working with teenagers, you'll have some teenagers who are really sweet and they'll tell you, oh, I love you, it's wonderful. Or you'll have the other teenagers who are like, oh, this is horrible, I don't like this teacher. But I think the interesting thing is that you can't always take what young people say at face value, not always. And that sometimes you have an impact and you don't realize that you're having an impact. And one of the things in my classroom is I don't really do a whole lot of like direct biblical Christian instruction in my classroom, but I do write like proverbs or Bible verses or wise sayings on my board. And I just kind of leave it there, and I don't even tell kids, hey, look at this. It's just there. And it changes from week to week or day to day, depending on my time. And once I had a student who came and she told me, she's like, oh, this saying that you had on the board, it meant so much to me, and I really thought about it. And I was like, well, I'm glad to know that, is that there are things that you're doing and maybe you don't think anyone notices or is listening to you, but they are.
Wow. And I'm sure many of them have noticed it, and they just don't say it. Like you said, they don't say it, and some are more verbal than others. But
exactly.
You never know the impact's going to happen. And now to wrap it up for today, any tips or pointers you want to share with parents that are listening?
Continually pray for your young people. Always continue to be involved, even as they get older, and you may not have to be hands-on with them as much anymore, but still look at their grades, still ask them what they did in school today or what they're learning, what they're struggling with. Always be willing to listen and just encouraging them to continue to learn, to always be lifelong learners.
Nice, awesome. And what about for the younger listeners? Let's say students that could be listening.
For young people is that your education never ends. I mean, even after you graduate from college, is that life is always about learning. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong or you don't know something, but then always go back and do your best to learn. That's how all of us are, and it's something I think we'll be doing all the way through eternity. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, Atwania, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, getting to know you. Thank you for sharing all these tips and pointers, and thank you for joining us on this episode. Tune in on our next one because we're excited to get to know more of our teachers on this season 1 of Guided Growth.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Guided Growth. We hope Atwania Dubrail's journey from aspiring writer to dedicated educator has inspired you. Her story reminds us of the diverse paths to teaching and the profound impact educators have on young minds. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue to explore the inspiring world of education and parenting. Until then, keep nurturing the growth of those around you.